Paranormal Talk Radio, your door to the spirit world. Here's your chance to talk ghosts, spirits, psychics, and everything paranormal. For more information, go to www.portaltalkradio.com. Now, Portal Paranormal Talk Radio brings you your hosts.
And welcome to Portal Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm your host, Tuesday Miles.
And I'm Angela Thomas.
And you can listen to us on UPRN 105.8 New Orleans. How are you, Angela?
I'm doing fine, Tuesday. How about you?
I'm doing okay. It's summertime.
Ah, yes, all that heat and humidity.
I know it. And you know what? It used to be when we were young, we would look forward to having summer. But, I'll tell you, I'm pooped.
That's just age, Tuesday. It's just age.
Oh, please. No, I'm not going to admit to that. Not yet, anyways, on it. But I think the kids, when they're home from school, and I've got one now that's graduated and the other one that's going to be graduating next year. But still, it's like, you know what? You're on your own now. You're over 18. You make your own plans.
That's right.
But that doesn't stop them.
Right, and buy your own air conditioner, too.
They still want attention.
Well, I understand that California is having a very hot time of it out there.
It's not too bad. We really have perfect weather. I can't complain here. We really do. We are blessed to have perfect weather here in California.
Well, just think of some of our listeners are sitting in winter.
Oh.
Just think of those that are in snow right now.
I don't admire them.
So, pretty soon they'll be going into their spring and their lovely summer, and we'll be going into our fall and winter.
I'm okay with it now. I like summer. I think it makes everybody's skin look glowing and healthy.
Oh, well, good.
And on that note, well, we have two guests tonight that's joining us, and our first guest it's Michael. Now, I know I have a friend of mine that has the last name spelling, and she pronounces hers Keeney. So I'm just wondering, making sure if I have Michael's last name right. It's Michael Keeney.
And Michael is a producer of Ad Hoc Productions, and they have just produced, Tuesday, Visions, True Stories of the Supernatural.
You know what? I like that title.
I do, too. Very catchy and lets you know exactly what you're about to see on the film.
Absolutely. And, the animation also on it and the illustrations they have with it, too, are awesome. I've checked out some of them off of that site, and I'm excited for them. I think they've done a good thing here. They've got some great stories, some supernatural stories, and so we'll bring him on in just a second. On the second half of the show, we're coming on upon the death anniversary of Peter James, and his brother Tommy Nass is going to be joining us and updating us all on some of the stuff that we should expect to see from Peter James' life stories and stuff. So stay tuned for that, and that will be on the second half of the hour. And on that note, let's bring our guest in, joining us today, and welcome, Michael. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Now, did I pronounce that right?
No, you were totally wrong there.
Oh, God.
Well, you were close. It's Keen, right?
It's Keen. Now, I have a friend that pronounces hers Keeney.
That may actually have been the way that they pronounced that name back in Ireland or Wales. Actually, the name is based on the whole concept of keening, which was actually the ritual that women primarily would go through at funerals. It was kind of a wailing sound. So it's very possible that Keene was pronounced Keeny, kind of based on that, but now it's just plain old-fashioned Keen.
Huh. Well, either or on it, we are glad to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And so what came up? How did you come up with the name Visions for this?
Well, every illustration, every concept to me was a vision. One of the things that I attempted to do with the various artists, and in some cases, they were people I never even met. It was very interesting, especially in the last two projects that we did, where the voice actors lived all over the country, the artists lived all over the country, the animators lived over the country, and between emails and MP3 audio files and the like, the attempt was to, from my standpoint, to communicate, especially to the artist, my concept of each individual scene. And to their credit, the artists who I have found the best ones are actually the ones who listen the best, which I think is probably true of every profession. And so they actually, in a way, knew my vision better than I did. So I just thought it was apropos to bundle these 4 stories together and use the title Visions.
On choosing these particular 4 stories, though, and I was just saying earlier how I liked the one about the Fox sisters. I've heard about them before, but
right.
How did you come up with all 4 of these? Was there something that caught your eye, particularly on these specific 4?
Yes. Actually, the answer to this amazes me to this day. About 4 years ago, I decided, as a hobby, that I would try my hand at documentary filmmaking. And basically because I had always been a movie buff. In fact, I turned my basement into a movie theater. I had always been an avid amateur historian. And I love to research. I'm a person who, when I latch onto a story, I have to really know, as much as humanly possible, what really happened. And, even reading various historians' interpretations, and that's really what history is, isn't it? I mean, it's just one person's interpretation. And sometimes it's someone's interpretation of somebody else's interpretation. So in order to really get to the heart of the matter, I needed to find the original documents, which in some cases were almost 200 years old. But to get back to how I really stumbled upon this, I had decided that I was going to do a documentary, and of course my next question I asked myself is, what would I do it on? And it was something that was really pretty much mundane. I work in Rochester, New York, and had worked in an office building, and across the street from the office building was a mall. And underneath the mall is a parking garage. Well, I parked my car in the parking garage for 20 years, and of course would come back and forth through this mall. This mall had been a very interesting structure because it was built back in 1962, and it was the first urban indoor shopping mall ever built. And over the past several years, it had fallen on rather hard times. A lot of the tenants had moved away. It was very controversial as to what are we going to do with this 40-some-odd-year-old building. Could have had a lot of asbestos in it, so on and so forth. And so I thought, because it was something I was familiar with, that I would try my hand at a documentary and that I was going to attempt to uncover the origins of this shopping mall. Now, that's pretty bland stuff, a shopping mall. But as I began to research the history behind the origins of this mall, I came across the individuals who were really the prime movers and shakers of getting this mall built, and learned that their parents, in the one case the father of the person who was primarily responsible for this mall, had come to Rochester in 1901 and had subsequently bought a building that eventually became the cornerstone of this mall. But what I didn't realize, and I didn't learn until much later, as I was reading his obituary, and by the way, this fellow's name was John McCurdy, originally from Philadelphia, was in business with his brother back in the late 1800s, had sold the business, was very successful, traveled around the country looking for his next opportunity, and chose, for some reason, Rochester. And so what I learned from his obituary is that back in 1901, when he comes to Rochester, he makes it known he wants to buy this building that was on the corner of Clinton Street and Elm Street, which doesn't mean much to you, but that's where the building was located. And when it became known that he was interested in purchasing it, he was approached by various merchants who who owned businesses in the area, and they warned him not to buy the building.
Now, why would they warn him, Michael?
Well, here's the reason that I found out. It was the impression of the business people around there that particular street corner was cursed, and that anyone who attempted any sort of business enterprise there was doomed to have it fall upon the shoals of destruction. That was the exact wording in his obituary. And what's more, the street corner was known back then as Hoodoo Corner. So when I came
Hoodoo Corner?
Hoodoo, H-O-O-D-O-O.
Right, Hoodoo Corner.
A lot like voodoo, and there's
right,
some similarities.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the hoodoo, okay.
Okay,
right,
hoodoo,
right.
you want to learn about hoodoo, you're going to go back to Africa. And what, in fact, the interpretation of hoodoo is very interesting in and of itself. So I came across this very strange reference to this street corner, which is right where my mall is, and that the feeling was that it was cursed. So then I decided to change the focus of my research to what happened on this street corner to cause this belief to come about that it was cursed. And amazingly, I stumbled upon my first story, which was about the first person ever murdered in Rochester back in 1837, and who was murdered in where that street corner is located.
Okay.
And the name of that is called The Murder of William Lyman. And what we did is we were able to find the original 1837 police eyewitness reports and the original 1838 court transcripts.
Oh, very interesting. I know you had a field day with that.
Well, it was actually more than a field day. What I decided as I read through the court transcripts and the police eyewitness reports is that the language that was used back then was so interesting that I decided to take as my dialogue the information that I found in the court transcripts verbatim. So when we hear the judge, by the way, not only was this the first murder in Rochester, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too much, but it also subsequently leads to the first execution in Rochester. So, but when the judge sentences the murderer to death, he does it in a way that you would just never hear somebody speak like that. I have to tell you, and you know, I'm going to hold a few things back in the hopes that maybe somebody may want to see some of these, but as I was going through the court transcripts and had basically finished the murder of William Lyman, incredibly to me, I found a reference in a census that came out 43 years after the murder that suddenly enabled me to see this case in an entirely different way.
And what information was that, Michael?
Well, basically what I was able to put together is what happened to his family, the murder victim's family. When you read about most murders, and I'm the same as everyone else, there's the headline, there's the blurb, so-and-so was shot or stabbed or whatever happens, and maybe there's a little bit of a follow-up as far as what might have happened to the person, the perpetrator, but typically that happens a couple of years later and no one really remembers what the person did or how. But what you never really ever learn, I don't think, is what happened 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago to the family of, in this particular case, the person who died. What happened to his wife? What happened to his children? How were their lives altered? And what I was also able to do, which still blows my mind to this day, is that as I was doing my research, I came across a fellow who seemed to have an awful lot of information, genealogy website, who lives in San Diego, as a matter of fact, and I called him and found out that he is related to William Lyman.
That's amazing.
Wow.
100 and almost 80 years after his death, And so we had a very interesting conversation. Of course, he was very interested in what I was doing and so on and so forth. So it was a tremendous amount of what I'm going to say fun, but I also believe that I don't want to be too corny about it, but we kind of resurrected, if you will, William Lyman as a person, and he's described in glowing terms, and as well as the rest of his family. And there's a lot of other unusual stuff that we found while we were researching this story. So I thought that perhaps I had come to a possible solution to what was the origin of Hoodoo Corner. I mean, could someone have been murdered back in 1837 and 64 years later to still have people believe that that area was cursed? And I actually began consulting with psychics, and we got into the whole area of perhaps the murderer or the murder victim spirit remains, in that area, and so on and so forth. So
does that corner have that feel, Michael?
Well, I'm going to answer that right at the end. Let me know when we have about 1 minute left. I'm going to tell you something that actually just happened today.
Okay.
On that street corner. Okay? So I thought I had come up with maybe a partial explanation for the origins of Hoodoo Corner, but I didn't feel that I had really solidly understood it. But as I was researching the murder of William Lyman, I stumbled upon a fascinating case about a fellow whose name is William Morgan. Now, because of the William Lyman, William Morgan, they both lived in Rochester. Both of these events happened very close to one another. I was acquiring information and notes on this William Morgan fellow, and by the time I got done with William Lyman, I thought I knew, mostly about the William Morgan case. And the William Morgan case is this. He was a fellow and he lived in Rochester, and he was about to publish a book that was going to reveal the inner secrets of the Masonic Order. Ooh. He was a disgruntled Mason and was going to reveal these secrets. Now, this is in 1826. Mm-hmm. It's alleged that William Morgan was kidnapped and was eventually murdered to prevent this book from being published. And we call our story The Strange Disappearance of Captain William Morgan, because what we uncovered was information stranger than even the basic story. And even though this case is now 182 years old and remains technically or officially unsolved because they never did find his body, I feel, because of a piece of information that I was able to come across, which if we have time, I'll tell you, to me it's one of the most interesting things I was able to stumble across, that tells me what actually happened to this Captain William Morgan.
So really, Michael, you are not only providing the story, but you're also incorporating American history and an era. Is that correct?
Yes. And to me, as a amateur historian, I love these stories on many different levels. To me, I really am drawn to them because of the specific people and events and the details of exactly what happened. And maybe it's a good thing just to look back and say, why? Now, we haven't even covered the other two stories, but why did these things, these people, these events, these kind of strange happenings, why did they all happen here? And why did they all have a relationship to the origins of Hoodoo Corner? And not only did they all happen here, and there was a relationship with a very small geographical area, namely a street corner, and also they all happened within a fairly short period of time of one another. But, that's another aspect of this. But yeah, when William Morgan disappeared. There became a movement called the Anti-Masonic movement, which eventually led to the Anti-Masonic Party,
Right.
which put up the first third, well, actually became the first third political party in the United States. They ran a fellow for the presidency in the 1832 election, and who garnered 250,000 votes for president.
Wow.
The Anti-Masonic Party, and this to me is what becomes even more interesting, eventually morphs into the Whig Party, which later becomes the Republican Party. So you see these various events, and so yes, I mean, not only are we talking about specific, individuals and locations and so on and so forth, but the wider social, political, and religious events that swirled around these stories and around this area, to me, is fascinating.
Well, Michael, don't you see that influence even in today's society and today's government from that anti-Masonic movement, to try to separate church from state, and, I mean, not just our roots in government as it was forming, but, I mean, they really did, do a lot of horrendous things to make sure that, church and state were going to remain separate, and to keep that society very secret. And, I know in Europe it was outlawed. So don't you find that rather intriguing that it was so highly influential back then that it still spills over today?
Well, listen to this story. And this is actually ultimately what caused me to do the story about the disappearance of Captain William Morgan. I ran across a reference. Now, this William Morgan fellow disappears in 1826. In 1848, 22 years later, the impact of the anti-Masonic movement was so strong that 90% of all of the Masonic lodges in the state of New York had closed.
Mm-hmm.
And in a little town that's about 30 miles south of Rochester, which actually was and is one of the original Masonic lodges, this Masonic lodge used to meet on the third floor of a place called the American Hotel. Now, this is back in 1848.
Right.
I know the guy who owns the American Hotel. Actually, he's a client of mine. And when I read this, so anyway, I read the reference, and here's what happened. One night, it was during the winter, these Masons were meeting, again, on the third floor of the American Hotel. And when the meeting was over, and they left the room, they noticed that their overcoats were missing. And they concluded that somebody had stolen their coats inexplicably. Well, a month later, they're having another meeting, and they walk out of the room, and there are all of the overcoats very neatly in a pile, tied together with twine, with a note attached. And the note reads that a concerned citizen of Lima, New York, which is the little town where the hotel is located, had found the overcoats and knew that they belonged to the Masons and wanted to make sure that they were returned.
Jeez.
But unbeknownst to the Masons, the overcoats had been intentionally infected with smallpox.
Oh.
And that all of the Masons in that room that night, except for one, came down, and again, as it was described in the newspaper article of 1848, came down with that dreaded contagion.
Oh.
So when I read that, I said, is it possible that, and to your point, that the disappearance of William Morgan 22 years earlier was such a profound event that it would cause someone 22 years later to intentionally infect the overcoats of these Masons?
Wow.
So that
So
becomes...
there's a lot of elements going on in just that story alone.
There is. Absolutely.
Oh, tremendous. Yeah, I mean...
How did he come up with the name Captain? Was he a pirate?
William Morgan claimed to have been an officer, a captain, in the War of 1812.
Okay.
And so he would parade himself or describe himself as being a former captain. So that's why I put that together. So it had nothing to do with, a captain of a ship, but it was as a officer in the War of 1812, which is disputed, by the way, whether he was actually ever in that war. In fact, a lot of things about William Morgan are disputed, even the fact that he was actually a former Mason. And there's so many aspects to this story. One of the things about our documentaries, which I think is a major strength, but in a way it can also be looked at as a weakness, is that we take a story like this, and we can only just touch upon all of these facets in about 20 to 25 minutes. I've had people say, you've cursed me, because now I have to go and do all this research on my own to know, to learn all the details, because they want to now know, and because, the relationship, and I'll tell you just one thing very quickly, and we could go on forever about this one story, but when William Morgan disappears, his wife, Lucinda Morgan, marries a fellow by the name of Washington, and who actually happened to be their landlord, which was kind of interesting. So she and her second husband leave the Rochester area 3 years after Morgan has disappeared and is presumed dead. They travel to Indiana, and who do they meet up with is Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church.
Oh, my goodness.
Subsequently, Amanda Morgan becomes Joseph Smith's third plural wife.
What?
Morgan
Let's
is
stop there,
Morgan.
because I really want to move on.
Well, yeah, we have to go. I mean, you just have to trust me here. I mean, there's Amanda Morgan in and of herself is a fascinating character, just based on, and there's other really wild stuff that happened to her even after that, if you can believe that. So anyway, the strange disappearance of Captain William Morgan, and the fact that we ended up filming part of the story. We do have some live cinematography, which we did in the American Hotel, which I thought was apropos, considering that partly of these events occurred there, which, by the way, the people who own the American Hotel, and which that hotel has been in their family for over 70 years, are firmly convinced that that hotel is haunted. And I'll just mention that the ghost of William Morgan is thought to haunt the American Hotel. And we spent 12 hours filming there, and I can tell you that that was a very interesting experience in and of itself. Well, talking about, about ghosts and so on and so forth, eventually leads me to the story about the Fox sisters.
Oh, yes.
Okay?
Maggie and Katie Fox.
Correct. And they lived about 30 miles from here, and very briefly, 14-year-old Maggie Fox, 11-year-old Kate, living with their parents in a place called Hydesville, New York, which again is only about 30 miles from here. Over a period of several months, would hear strange knocking or rapping sounds. And one night, which is March 31st, 1848, very important date in the world of the spiritualist movement, they began to hear these sounds very insistently. And they, in fact, at one time, they all got up, they lit candles, and they searched the entire house, went down into the cellar. They could not find the source of the rapping sounds. But the rapping sounds continued. So Kate, the youngest, and at the time appeared almost as a lark, began snapping her fingers kind of in rhythm or in response to the rapping sound. Well, incredibly, the rapping sounds then began to appear to be communicating to Kate Fox. During the course of the night, their father, John Fox, designed an alphabet, and where very simply, one snap of of the finger, or one rap would mean one letter, and so on and so forth. What they were able to determine by the end of the evening was that the sounds were coming from a fellow by the name of Charles Rosna, who had been a peddler, and who a few years earlier had visited the Fox cottage, which was before the Fox family owned the cottage, and had been murdered for his money and for his goods. Again, he was a traveling peddler, and he was buried in the cellar of the house.
Ooh.
Well, that becomes the genesis of what we now call the birth of the modern spiritualist movement. These two little girls, literally within a few years of this event, became international celebrities and were feted by the highest reaches of society. They counted as their friends no less than, some of the major political and social characters, Susan B. Anthony, Frederick Douglass. Spiritualism really took hold during that time period, and especially during the Civil War and subsequent to the Civil War. So I find on one level, in fact, there's three little parts to this story that I find fascinating. One, of course, is what did happen on the night of March 31st, 1848, right. Okay? And I stumbled upon what I believe is the answer.
And what did you discover, Michael?
Well, I can't tell you. Can't tell you.
Are you going to hold us in suspense?
That's right. But this was something that happened 10 years after the death of the last of the Fox sisters. And it was a discovery that was made in the cellar of the house. Now, let me tell you something that's going to make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. That cellar was discovered about 15 years ago and has been reclaimed and now has a pavilion, glass-enclosed little building that's been built around the cellar. And you can go there today. They turned it into a little park. And so you can peer in there and you can see the cellar where the rapping sounds appear to have emanated from, and of course is the same cellar where this discovery was made. So that was my first obvious fascinating aspect of the story, is what did happen that night. The second
they had
part...
another sister, didn't they? There was three sisters, wasn't there?
Well, there were three sisters. Leah was the third. She was a much older sister, and she had a very powerful influence on the two girls. That lasted for many, many years. And then there was a... this leads into what I thought was the second most... in fact, I think it's the most interesting aspect of the entire story is the relationship between these three sisters, but more so between Maggie and Kate. And I can only tell you this, and I don't want to tell you the whole thing, because it's in the documentary, that Maggie Fox, much later on in life, does something for Kate Fox that to me is one of the most amazing, I guess, expressions of love that one person, in this case, what a sister did for her other sister. It's just a phenomenal thing that she did, an extremely courageous thing. So I thought that the relationship between these two girls was the second fascinating thing about it. And then the third is, again, all of the social, political, and religious stuff that swirled around the lives of these people, like the women's rights movement, the anti-Masonry movement had started a little bit prior to that, the anti-slavery movement, the founding of the Mormon Church, the founding of the Oneida community, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Pentecostals, the Shakers, the Quakers, Free Will Baptists. Because ultimately, and this, we'll maybe get to the fourth story, but ultimately what I discovered is the reason that all of this stuff happened here was because of the building of the Erie Canal and what became, for people living in New England, their major gateway west. So those people who were searching for religious freedom and who came from primarily England and, of course, came to the United States and settled in New England, that restlessness did not cease. And a lot of them continued to migrate. And again, this Erie Canal, which was the major gateway, and Rochester at that time became the fastest growing city in the United States. In fact, Rochester at one time was bigger than Chicago. You also had a fellow by the name of Charles Finney, who is considered to be the greatest evangelist of all time, came through this area and was literally preached to thousands of people. So you had, that period is called the Second Awakening. And if you just Google Second Awakening, they'll tell you an awful lot about it. And this whole area was referred to by Charles Finney as the Burned Over District. And
the Burned Over District?
Burned Over District. And it's not what you think it might be. What it actually means is that so many people had become converted into one religion or another that there was no fuel left for further conversions. The area had become burned over. The founding of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith, that whole story, he figures prominently in one way or another in all of these stories. The Quakers figure prominently in all of these stories, the Quaker missionaries. But anyway,
Maggie and Kate really were the first psychic mediums, is dubbed that, actually. That's what they were titled as. So,
they were.
But didn't they later on in life, though, weren't they discredited for what they were doing? I mean, were they really psychic mediums?
Well, here's where we get to the part where what Maggie did for Kate. It is true that in 1880, 1881, Maggie Fox confesses that the whole thing with the rapping sounds was something that they made up.
Oh boy!
And that's probably when you learn about the story of the Fox sisters, and when you get that far into the story, you immediately say, well, yeah, the whole thing was a hoax. They were charlatans, and most people walk away from the story. And actually, I did about 3-4 times. Each time I came across the Fox sisters, I would get to that point and I would lose interest. But then I learned something. And what I learned was this, that Kate Fox, by the way, both of them became very serious alcoholics. And especially Kate Fox, whose alcoholism was so bad that she would sometimes abandon her children so she could go to the local pub to drink. Well, at one point, her children were taken away from her. And her children were taken away by what would have been back then Catholic charities.
Right.
The Catholic Church ran a lot of the orphanages.
And let me let the listeners know here for a second. Kate was born in 1938 and died in 1892. And
right.
Leah, the oldest sister, was born in 1814.
Right.
She died in 1890. And Margaret, or Maggie, was born in 1836 and died in 1893.
Yeah, they all died within a few years of each other. By the way, I went to their cemetery in Brooklyn.
Oh, that would have been really cool.
Yeah, that was. I brought my wife, my daughter, a friend, and well, nobody can really figure out what I'm all about. But for a good time, let's go to Brooklyn and we'll spend the day at the cemetery looking for their gravesite. But you're right. I mean, that's the time when they were born and died and so on, and so when I looked deeper behind why did Maggie Fox make this confession. Now, of course, the most logical reason is because it was true. But what I found out is that, and this is based on the research that I did, that Maggie Fox made a deal with the church officials who were holding Kate's children, that if she would confess that spiritualism was a hoax, because the Catholic Church certainly did not like the whole concept of spiritualism,
Right.
and that if she were willing to do that, they would return Kate's children back to her. So now, what's interesting is that a year later, Maggie recants her confession. Now, all of this, you kind of come up with, well, did she, didn't she, were they, was it real, isn't it? But it was only upon, I guess, the ultimate research of what I found happened 10 years after they had died that, to me, really puts this whole thing in perspective and just makes it a fascinating story as to perhaps answers the question, what did happen on the night of March 31st, 1848?
So on your DVD as Visions, by watching this, actually you can get the full entire story and the extra clues on the whole DVD, right?
Yes. Okay. And actually you use a good word there, clues, because again, if you remember, the whole idea was to see whether I could understand the origins of Hoodoo Corner, and each one of these stories gives us clues as to what the origins of Hoodoo Corner is all about.
How big is Voodoo Corner?
It's you go there today, and it's just a street corner. I've been there many, many, many times. I will tell you this, which I don't have in the documentary, but will be in number 5, which will tie the whole thing together. I don't know when I'm going to go about doing that, because I'm very happy with the way the 4 have come out, and it's kind of like, boy, you get an awful lot of stuff, but you don't get everything, which I always like in a movie myself. If they're going to give me every answer, then what am I going to think about when I walk out? But now, hopefully, this is something that people will think about.
Well, Michael, one of our listeners in our virtual auditorium is asking, is Visions True Stories of the Paranormal only available on DVD, or will your documentary also be available to television?
Well, they have been. Now, what I've done is that I made them available locally in cable access television.
Right.
There's a whole thing having to do with like the History Channel and so on and so forth, and that's an area that, frankly, I haven't really gone into. What I have done is, of course, I do like to sell these. And basically it started out as a hobby, and it still is, but of course I'm very interested in recouping my investment, at least, what I've spent. So I primarily market my DVDs to historical societies and to public and university libraries. And in fact, we just found out that the major distributor of DVDs to public libraries is going to feature Visions in their September issue.
Well, I have to say, Michael, that I'm absolutely fascinated with what you've produced, because not only have you brought forth personal accounts of individuals in history, but you've brought out the political sense, the main key players that we've heard their names again and again throughout American history, and you've brought it all together and just kind of led us from the beginning to the end. And that's what I find, extraordinarily fascinating.
I'm a spectator myself. When I did these, I was just as interested, hopefully, as anyone else who watches them, in terms of, I was amazed, the vibrancy, I guess, if you will, of, well, I'm always amazed by the United States, but, in fact, I just finished reading the book 1776, probably the most pivotal year in the Revolutionary War, and what happened and how we almost lost the Revolutionary War.
Right,
David McCullough, who I consider to be the greatest historian and writer, he wrote Adams, he wrote the book Truman, of course the book 1776 and others, he just has an incredible ability to bring to life the people. And who was George Washington? I learned more about George Washington as a human being, and just have an incredible respect for him as a leader. But that's what intrigues me about this. The wider events I find fascinating, and what's happened in this country and during this period of time, and then also all of the fascinating characters. And you just can't learn enough about them. There's
Michael, where can we get your DVD?
Well, okay. Here's what I'm going to throw a little commercial at you, and maybe a little something special, hopefully. If you go to my website, www.paranormaldvd.com, okay, that'll bring you there. And it'll give you, you go to the gallery page, and it'll give you a little blurb and all the 4 stories, and there's a little trailer, and there's a few other things. But if you go to the Buy DVD tab, what I do is I sell the DVD retail. This is all 4 stories packaged together for $29.95. Now, I sell them to libraries and historical societies who typically buy several, at a time.
Certainly.
I give them a very nice discount down to $19.95, and that includes shipping. And, of course, if you don't live in the state of New York, you don't have to worry about sales tax. So what I was thinking was this. Of course, you could go ahead and you could buy the DVD through PayPal, which I have on there, and you can pay your $29.95. Or there's a email link. And just click on the link. And just send me a short email. Of course, I need your name and your address. And I will mail you the DVD. Just say that you watch or listen to this show. And I'll be very happy to mail you the DVD for $19.95. Again, now I'm going to throw a little caveat on here. If you live in Australia or something, I will probably have to add a few dollars, to the shipping and handling. But I can ship, in the U.S. For free, and that's what I've done. I have free shipping.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And so, listeners, for $19.95, Visions, True Stories of the Paranormal, available through portaltalkradio.com or the paranormaldvd.com website.
Right, and don't forget to mention that you heard it on our show. Otherwise,
right,
you'll get full price on that one. That's a great deal. Thank you for offering that.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? The stories are just endless on this, and it just seems to lead from one, clue to the next clue to the next clue, and it brings in more and more people. What I liked about the Fox sister stories is that they still made history as being the first spiritualists out there, the first psychic mediums, even though that it did say, the one sister did prove that she did have some kind of psychic powers. And, and although, they thought the rapping was something that was fake, but it seemed that when she was doing her seances, that every time that she was putting her hand over something, it would make loud noises.
They never proved that she made those noises herself. And she was under constant investigation, and she performed in front of, many people whose sole objective was to see how she was doing this. By the way, it was alleged that the way she did it is by cracking the bones in her toes.
Oof.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. But people who were right there and who surrounded her were never able to hear that or determine that they were in any way fabricating these sounds, because the sounds appeared to be coming from elsewhere. I would just like to say one other thing. The 4th story, I'll be real quick, The Code of Handsome Lake. Seneca,
go ahead. We have about 4 minutes. Go ahead.
Seneca Prophet, who, fascinating story, in 1799, Handsome Lake, that's his real name, was a desperate alcoholic. By the way, as you go through each of these stories, you realize that alcoholism had an incredibly strong hold on people at that time. Not that it doesn't now, but I think especially back then, which led to an amazing amount of violence, which ultimately led to the revival or religious movements who came in to deal with this, and then the whole phenomena of redemption, which all of these stories have. Ultimately, there's a redeeming quality of the people. Even the murderer of William Lyman is redeemed the night before he is to be executed because of something that happens in his jail cell, which, again, I won't tell you what that is. But Handsome Lake is in the throes of dying from alcoholism and has a series of visions where he claims to be visited by 3 spirit messengers who are sent down from the great ruler to accomplish 2 things. First of all, to help cure him, and the second, to impart upon him a code of conduct that he would then go out to teach to his followers. I'll just skip to the end because the process of this is fantastic, but within 2 years of this event, of these series of visions of this person who was so sick with alcoholism, didn't even get out of his bed for 4 years, who not only recovers but becomes a prophet and whose message is still reenacted to this day on Seneca reservations. And we are in the land of the Senecas. The Senecas live here. This is, which is part of the Iroquois Federation. But Handsome Lake comes to the attention of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson hears what Handsome Lake is doing up here and sends him a letter. And by the way, if you Google Thomas Jefferson letter, Handsome Lake, you can read that letter that Thomas Jefferson writes to Handsome Lake, which he titles "My Dear Brother." And it's a fascinating window, I think, into, well, both people. I think probably more especially Thomas Jefferson, who, when you learn more about him, I know I am incredibly impressed with, with this individual. So Handsome Lake and the code of Handsome Lake, to me, is a fascinating story, and especially in terms of what he teaches his people, which is, in our own politically correct world we live in, you're going to be very surprised what he tells his people to do and not to do. Which, again, you'll have to see it to see what I mean.
Michael, we only have about a minute left on it. Who did the illustrations on this?
When I first started, I actually had a 75-year-old retired guy who did the illustrations for the first story, the William Lyman story. He did some of them for the second one, the William Morgan, and then I had another artist who contributed. But for the last 2 stories, I've had this incredible artist, actually from Columbus, Ohio. She now lives in Seattle, Washington, and another fellow who lives in Kentucky. And they did all of the illustrations, and as you look through the In Search of White Crows, especially in the Code of Handsome Lake, you'll see some differences, and we did that intentionally. And I look at some of those images, and in fact, when you go to the website, most of what you're going to see there was done by the gal from Columbus, Ohio, 22 years old, incredibly talented. In fact, I'm glad you brought it up because if nothing else, I think we present. And again, I'm not the artist, so I'm not patting myself on the back. I think we have some great art here.
Yeah, I do too. On it. Well, listen, we've got to cut to our break. And
okay.
Listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Very interesting stuff. You can find Michael's website on the portal site for more information. And thank you so much for being our guest tonight. It was very interesting.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
And stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. This is Portal Paranormal Talk Radio.
Are you still there?
We're still there. 1 second.
You are listening to the Paranormal Radio Network.
Welcome back to Portal Paranormal Talk Radio. Here again are your hosts.
Hi, welcome back to Portal Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm your host, Tuesday Miles.
And I'm Angela Thomas.
Hi, Angela. That was a great interview.
It was, and how interesting.
Wasn't enough time on there for us to get fully through all of them. I know that it's when you're really excited about something and you want to explain thoroughly through it, it's just you just can't when we only have such a short time.
I know. I wanted to hear more about the political and the religious aspects and the era because, did you find that he was mentioning all of these historical people that we read about it in our American history books?
Absolutely, and I wanted to know more actually exactly where this Hoodoo Corner is and really what it it's about.
Oh, I know.
I mean, is it a corner where you go and, you say your little words and something happens? I really want to know exactly what is a Hoodoo Corner.
Well, it sounded to me like there was a lot of hoodoo history going on there. And Tuesday, hoodoo is still practiced today.
Yes, it is, Angela. In fact, I don't know a whole lot about it. So I can't make too many statements in regarding it. But, to me it sounds like it's a form of voodoo, isn't it?
No, actually, it's not a form of voodoo.
Okay.
Actually, you could say it is like a country version or a simple people's version of magic.
Okay. Well, if we have an expert out there on hoodooism, if you could, send us an email at info@portaltalkradio.com. Let us know that you are an expert on hoodooism. We'd like to, bring you on the show and talk about it.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. Tuesday, I spent many years in New Orleans, Louisiana, and you can, literally meet people that, practice hoodoo, and it's as though it's nothing unusual. We hear about New Orleans and voodoo quite a bit. But hoodoo is alive and well in Louisiana.
Wow, huh? Is it a white kind of magic? Is that, am I saying it right? Is it a white magic, Angela?
Well, I wouldn't call it a white magic, and I can't call it a black magic because, like voodoo, one is able to do both good and bad with hoodooism. So, but you find it in the everyday culture. And it's nothing to go out, take a little ride out to the plantations or beyond the sugar fields and talk to somebody about doing a little something for you, a little spell,
a little something.
Or a little ritual, or to go and collect something from them that will help to change your situation.
Huh. Okay, that's interesting.
So I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the movie The Skeleton Key. But that particular movie had a lot of hoodooism in it.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No, I haven't. I never heard of that.
Kate Hudson was the star of that movie.
Oh, never heard of it.
Goldie Hawn's daughter, Kate Hudson, has a great soundtrack, by the way, and it's based and filmed in Louisiana. And so we see a lot of hoodoo culture going on. So it's called The Skeleton Key.
Oh,
very interesting.
Oh, Sassy Cat says it's on cable all the time. Well, I'll have to rent it, I guess, and see it sometime on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who was going to join us today was Peter James, who is a world-renowned psychic ghost hunter, famous throughout the whole world. Died last year on July 31st, 2007. After a long illness that he had. The reports say that he, the final cause of death was heart failure, of course, because, the heart's got to go, I guess, in order to diagnose you with something, but that's what they said, is that his heart gave out. And, with the amount of people all over the world who recognized his work, he was on sightings for 10 years, plus some, Unexplained Mysteries, just numerous specials that he had done. From Alcatraz to the Heartland Ghosts that he did, the famous Heartland Ghosts, to the famous Queen Mary, which he spent, it seems like eternity on that ship, discovering more than 600 spirits on that ship, ghosts that were on the ship by name. He just had just an incredible amount of accomplishments, to his title, and just was loved from everybody around the world. Anybody who met Peter, he never forgot your face, he never forgot your name. His his phone number was always open to anybody who needed help, and he would help. He helped, I can't tell you, I mean, there's just endless amount of people who wrote on his guest book, his memorial guest book that's located on the Portal website, how much that he made a difference in their lives by teaching them, even on a television show, showing them that, there is somebody that is out there that they could believe in when it had to do with the paranormal or with being a psychic. And, he was just such a dear friend of mine. I know that when I contacted Peter James, 5 years prior to his death, through email, that he sent me his phone number right away, and from that day forward, him and I were just such great friends. I was lucky enough to have him in my home to have dinner and share each of our families with each other, and I still stay in contact with his brother. Peter, one thing that I worked with Peter on was this book that Peter had actually written a book, and he had it out in a raw manuscript that he was selling for a while, but it just wasn't finished. It was still raw, and there was so much more that he wanted to add to it. And I for some reason, Angela, I just kept bugging him about this. You've got to finish this. You've got to finish this. People, who love you, your fans, everybody in the world who admire you, wants to know what the rest of this is about. And finally, it just, that he just kept saying, okay. So he went back to writing for a while on it, and I was so glad because he was so proud of this. And I know that his brother, finally had it, finally edited and refinished up like Peter wanted it. And I know that it was going into a book form. And so we were hoping that we were going to have his brother on today. He's having trouble, I'm sure, with California freeways. It's no doubt that he's stuck somewhere, no doubt.
Right.
And so, but, if we hear a couple clicks, if you guys hear the clicks before we do, let us know if you hear that call waiting clicks on it, that it's him calling through. So we're hopefully he could join us by the end of the show and let us know what his updates are. But I do know that there also was a Peter James investigation movie being done about his life, and that was one thing that I think that I regret for Peter, is that forever he wanted to get done this website that he could go and have and create, and it was just he had the right intentions of it. He got the beginning of it done. It was spectacular, but time ran out, and he was unable to finish it. And one of these days, I would love to see him have this website that he really wanted to have done, and his work is all over the place. I know that I've gathered, I can't tell you how much of his stuff I've gathered. I mean, he's just everywhere, Angela. There's just, there must be 30, 40, 50, maybe even more, hundreds of hours of his footage all over the web, and from the work he's done, and the incredible, connections he had with Spirit. Very simple. He was very demanding of Spirit to, in his deep voice, speak to me, he would say, and he was that way if you'd ever go on to the Queen Mary and go on one of his tours, when we got into the pool room, the first thing he'd say is, speak to me, and boy, you'd hear these, and everybody would get real quiet, and we hear, we try to listen for something, and I know that I attended with him a couple of his last couple of tours that he did there. I said, listen, did you hear that? And he'd say, what was that? And I don't know whether I heard anything. I thought I did, and everybody else thought they did, but, it's because we knew that something was going to happen when you were with him.
Well, he did have a powerful presence as well as a powerful voice, Tuesday, and how does one man begin to write all of the experiences, or even, a little bit of his experiences? How does he attempt to write the book? Because, he has been around for many years, and he has influenced a great deal of people. And I think that was a very difficult task. He probably would have had to have written volumes of books.
Well, this is the thing. Peter didn't really need to write in all these books because he was so sharing with, with his work. you emailed him, he wrote you back what he felt about it. He was very simple with his theories, though, Angela. Very simple. He liked to keep it matter of fact. He didn't like to over exaggerate it. You know, he just explained what he felt was the logical way of thinking with his beliefs. And that's how he would explain it to you. Now, he would jokingly always say to me when I would say, I have to tell you something, you know, and he would say, is this going to scare me? Is this going to scare me? And I would say, you know, okay, stop joking with me, you know, and then I would tell him something I had experienced, you know, and I just hated it that he would break it down and make me think the logical way out of it, because I really wanted to think this was like some super duper supernatural event that happened, you know. and maybe it was, and maybe it wasn't, but it took the fear out of me. It just took the fear out of me, especially with something that would creep me out.
Well, you know, the thing is what I have seen, and I've watched quite a few videos of Peter James online, especially YouTube, and thank goodness for YouTube, right? But he just seemed to take control. He did not seem at all like he was asking. He was basically saying, I'm communicating with you, and I expect now for you to communicate back with me.
Right, and you know what? It seemed like they did. You know, I mean, in a lot of the videos that's on YouTube, you see him being slapped, burned, pushed.
Oh, I know.
You know, and he'd turn around and say, you know, now you be nice. you know, and I would think that others would probably run from that, but he didn't back down. You can literally hear him being slapped in one of the videos.
Well, I know, the Sally House.
Well, that one, and then in the Queen Mary, in the pool room, where it was Sarah who he had identified as a vortex there, probably one of the bully ghosts actually there, who slapped him.
Mm-hmm.
The conversations he had with Jackie. You know, here's the thing. I have been asked over and over again by several if Peter James was a ventriloquist. And my years of knowing him, I have never, ever seen him be a ventriloquist. Never heard him talk about it, never mentioned it, nothing. And the thing is that Peter had COPD, which is actually it's a breathing problem. It's from your lungs.
Right, a pulmonary
disorder.
So
my thought is that, you know, he had trouble breathing as it was. How could you possibly be a ventriloquist and have COPD and throw your voice all the way across the room in a very deep, loud voice?
There are always going to be skeptics out there,
absolutely.
Tuesday. So if they witnessed it, they would probably just say, you know, I guess that guy must be throwing his voice because this stuff is really not real.
Well, you know what, I mean, that's a bunch of crap. You know what, if he was, it would have never been used, you know, to try to fool people about his ghost hunting. He took that very seriously.
Well, I have to tell you, you know, I did watch the Sally House documentary with Peter James, and you're right. I mean, he was punched and shoved into a door, and they captured it on film, and instead of him saying, okay, I'm out of here, he comes forward and says, I'm not afraid of you.
Yeah, he did.
But he says it really aggressive. I'm not afraid of you.
Yes, he did. He said, I'm not afraid of you.
And I thought, wow, I'd like to have this guy in my corner.
You know, and then he had discovered this ghost of this little girl in the Queen Mary, which was identified as Jackie. Now, in both of the DVDs that was out that Peter had done, The Ghost of the Queen Mary and Peter James Investigations, both were done on the Queen Mary, Jackie comes through and speaks to him, you know, and he has such a fondness for this little girl, like almost being very protective of her. She had died, actually, in the pool room, but which we did not know that the Queen Mary actually had two areas, which had a first-class pool and a pool for the lower-class passengers, and which is the first-class pool, which is now the theater. That is the one in which she actually died in. But there's a huge history behind that, and you know, the Queen Mary is doing better. It went through some ownership changes and was run down for a little while, but it seems that they're picking it back up again, and they still have quite a bit of events going on. And although Peter's ashes were going to remain on the ship with a museum, a paranormal museum that was supposed to be built for him, but because of the change in ownership, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hoping that one day when the new owners of the Queen Mary catch up with their, they have a lot of things they have to fix on that ship. And then,
right, their business at hand.
Absolutely. That they'll go ahead and do what they say they were going to do and do this museum for him, because he does have, we just have tons of his stuff, and I think that people would really generally love just to go and visit and see, all the documentation that he has in regarding ghost hunting.
So now, Tuesday, what is the word about a movie being done?
Well, there's supposed to be done it was made for TV. It was Peter James Investigations, and the buzzword on it, they were just, as far as I knew, I'm not sure where it's gone from, how far it's gone so far, but I know that they were casting for it. And I really do hope that they cast the part of Peter James with Sam Elliott.
I know the actor.
Sam Elliott? I think
Sam Elliott.
Oh, what?
I mean, and you got to admit that the look, the graying hair and the darker mustache, and there's a lot of similarities to the two men.
Oh, absolutely. And totally, Angela. I mean, from the hair and the mustache, Sam Elliott, I mean, he's been known to play in a lot of westerns, but he's gorgeous in himself. And Peter's too. Peter was very handsome, and the fact is that everybody asked me, how old was Peter? I don't know. There's only one person that knows how old Peter was. Well, maybe two, but I know that neither one of them would tell.
Reveal it. Huh?
No. I think I got a hint out of him one day, but I wouldn't reveal that. That's something that, it didn't matter to him. But also too on that, Angela, I did, in fact, somebody else was up here. I have to scroll back in the virtual auditorium and look to see. Somebody mentioned the title of the video is Tribute to Peter James. That's Skylord. There's actually two videos out there that has a tribute to Peter James. One I did and one my daughter did, and I believe there was a couple that came after that of showing personal pictures of him and describing somewhat of his life. I also get asked too, Angela, if I get visitations from him.
And do you?
Well, yes. Not all the time. I don't. How he visits me is that it's usually around 3 o'clock in the morning. My cat will wake up sneezing and sneezing and sneezing and sneezing, which wakes me up, of course. And I always know that it's him because I can hear him snickering and laughing because of the cat.
Now, why do you think that he chooses to utilize your cat for that?
Well,
you think he's a jokester?
Oh, yeah. Peter loved to tease. He loved to tease. That was one of his favorite things to do, was to tease, and especially I know with teasing with me, he did. And that was great. And making the cat sneeze, and it's so subtle because all I see him is about his from his breastplate up. I just get that much of him, and but see, the only thing I get from him is really when his brother's birthday's coming up or somebody of a family member's birthday's coming up. And that was just like Peter, because he'll usually start about 2 weeks, 3 weeks ahead of time of their birthday by reminding them, their birthday's coming up. And when I was saying this to his brother one day, and I says, your brother was by here, he wants to say happy birthday, and he says, oh, God, that's just like him to start 3 weeks before. Because he would always do that. He would always start, 2 or 3 weeks before somebody's birthday and start calling them and wishing them happy birthday every other day. So it was a good validation on that, on it. But otherwise than that, Angela, I've had other people say that they've, get messages from all the time, or he steers them in a direction, and hey, maybe he does. I know I'm not going to be the only one that he's going to visit. He's got some other really great friends out there, lots of great friends.
Well, now let me ask you. I've never been to the Queen Mary, and I'm hoping to within the next 12 months. But does the Queen Mary still show Peter James' work through a movie? I know at one time they did.
Yes, they do. On Ghost and Legends, I haven't been over on that side for a while, and I'm not sure if they're still showing the little videotapes. What you do is you go in, you have to pay for it, it's a different attraction, and then it comes in on a video screen, and Peter starts talking, and he starts sharing some of the history of the Queen Mary, and then as you go to each location, sometimes a little video screen would come up, and he would talk about it. I am not sure if they're still using that or not. It's been a long time since I've been over on that side of the Queen Mary. It is a complete separate attraction. Actually, they say it's more into where the more haunted side of the ghost ship is.
Well, I understand that you have some EVPs that Peter had shared with you, and I know that Peter James was the first guest on the Portal Paranormal Talk Radio show. And so, hopefully one of these days we'll revisit that Tuesday and listen to those EVPs because, there's an effect there. I think there's a human connection as soon as we hear those spirits speak.
Well, it's almost kind of eerie, too, though, Angela, because, we've got some from the Heartland Ghost, some from the... I'm thinking what house that was. I believe that was the Whaley house that he was at. Let me look real quick. I have it right here. God, he just was everywhere. I have to change sites. So give me a second here to go that. You can continue on what you were asking.
Well, no, I think that there's a definite emotion that we, the living, feel and go through when we hear the voices of those in spirit. And I'm so happy that now they have the equipment out that is able to capture that voice phenomenon, So, when I heard Jackie, that little girl, which is the famed little girl spirit on the Queen Mary, it is rather emotional.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely on it. And I think that also, too, that was when, I started hearing some people talk about, whether or not he was a ventriloquist or not.
No, there's absolutely no way that he could have possibly done that. Because one of the EVPs, it almost sounds as though the echo in the room that he was in was bouncing all over the place. I think it was when she was saying to meet her at the pool or something of this nature.
Yes, that's when he was confusing to him because the fact of it is that here it was, they thought that there was only one pool and at the Queen Mary, and it ended up being two pools. And so when she said that she would meet him at the other pool, it stumped him because he's like, what other pool is she talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And it was then, I guess with research, see, Disney actually had all of the records and the logs of the ship's journeys. Every time the ship sailed, they had all of that. And when Disney stopped utilizing the ship as a tourist attraction, and a couple other new owners came into about, Disney took all that historical information with them, and it's not been very accessible since. But there's, here it is there's Unexplained Mysteries. There's, he went through this America's Most Haunted. There's, the Sally House had some really good stuff also on it. There's let me see the audio files here. Has got, here we go. This show's here with, oh my goodness, there's so many of them. Yes, I was correct. It was from the Whaley House. Sally the Ghost. It shows Heartland Ghost, Queen Mary. There's in the suburban home he was in. It was this is the site. In fact, I'll put this into the virtual auditorium site where you can go and actually listen to these EVPs, and I'll post it on the portal site. Unless you want me, I can tell you it's www.glowing, GLOWING, dial.com, and they're audio files that has. Oh wait, if they haven't been trying to call. Okay, hold on. I got his brother on the phone.
All right.
Okay, so 1 second. Let's see here. on it. Go ahead and keep talking, Andrew. Give me a second here to deal with your brother.
So that website again that Tuesday was sharing is www.glowingdial.com.
Glowingdial.com.
To listen to the audio files of EVPs and Peter James.
Oh, great. I'm glad to have him on here, so let's get that number out to him again. Where's our station manager here? Maybe what we could do is just take a real quick 2-minute break.
Okay, that sounds very, very good.
Instead of just doing this on it, and let's grab that number again. And Joe, can you take us out to the station break real quick, and we'll be right back.
And keep listening to Port.
Welcome back to
Okay, welcome back to Portal Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm your host, Tuesday Miles.
And I'm Angela Thomas.
And we have Tommy Nast on the phone joining us. Hi, Tommy.
Hi, how are you Tuesday? Hello, Angela.
Hello, Tommy.
And Tommy is the brother of my beloved Peter James. And we're all been wondering, though, is there anything new we can expect from Peter?
Well, it's been almost a year. The 31st will mark the anniversary of Peter's death, unfortunately. But the past year, it's been kind of a whirlwind. Dealing with all of that has been difficult, and now just trying to turn it all into a positive and trying to keep his legacy going forward. It's been pretty cool, though. We've got some great things that I would love to tell you and share it with you. First off, we have had a wonderful script written on a number of Peter's paranormal episodes, and we're looking at right now several film companies that have expressed a great interest in recreating some of these and doing some great work around that, and potentially what could be a television series or what could be an actual movie. So that's something that these things take so much time sometimes, and wanted to make sure that it was all done right, and went through some things at first that I wasn't really pleased with, and then we finally became pleased with what we did with the script that's coming around now. And also we're very close to finishing up a book on Peter's life, or basically it's his words that have been kind of written up and everything, and that's kind of happening right now too. So we're hoping that people that remember my brother and the great work that he did will have some great things for them to continue on that can keep his legacy going?
Well, you know, Tommy, we have on the Portal website a memorial page for Peter, and still to this day, people still are discovering that about his death and are still going in and signing it.
Well, and that's great. And Tuesday, you were always wonderful. I mean, when you started that off, it was like, wow, this is great. It quickly became the official website there and place where people could go and leave stories, and even our family members all contributed to it and everything. And thank you again for everything that you did on that.
You're welcome on it. I still go in and read, the messages that were left. And, interesting, they're messages from all over the world, though, Tommy. They really are from everybody all over the place. Peter wasn't just known here in California. He was known all over the world.
Oh, I know. I remember the calls he used to get and the conversations we used to have about people that would, contact him and try to reach out to him. So it's great that people still remember him.
Oh, absolutely, and always will remember him. I mean, to me, he's the Godfather.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you can just get him to give me some help when I'm in Vegas on some of those numbers when I'm,
Okay. Here's the thing: when your brother tells you and gives you a message, which I was just sharing with them, right before you came on, I says when he comes and visits me, and it's not all the time, he'll make my cat sneeze a bunch of times. And then he snickers about it. He just thinks that's so funny, and I was telling him how he, the first time he came was to tell me to wish you happy birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't know when your birthday was, but it wasn't for 3 weeks later
that your birthday
was.
What was great about that is that, for people that don't know, Peter would always call his family, his friends. He'd always want to be the first person that would wish you a happy birthday, so he would call you 3 weeks before your birthday and go, happy birthday, just want to make sure you know I remembered. And sure enough, 3 weeks before my birthday, Angela, I don't know if you knew this, Tuesday called me and said, Tommy, your brother visited me, and he said to tell you, happy birthday.
Oh, how sweet. How sweet. Well, Tommy, let me ask you, are you going to write a biography on your brother?
I am not writing it. We are writing, we're having written a book right now that will take Peter's words, his philosophies, and what his whole views on his paranormal his paranormal research, the gift that he had, and his stories on that. And we've just starting to go through a number of the pictures that'll be inserted in there and everything too. And the one thing, it's difficult because I try to have somewhat of a career myself in the entertainment business, and taking this on wasn't anything that I expected to do. And these things can be time consuming. Trying to get a book deal, trying to get a movie deal, trying to get a television series, trying to do the right thing to try to keep his legacy alive in a way that does not compromise the dignity that he always wanted to have in this world. I mean, that's one thing about Peter that you always remember. Peter would never want to do anything that made him look bad or that would compromise his credibility in the world of paranormal research.
Okay, Tommy, was Peter a ventriloquist?
A ventriloquist?
Yes, let's put this to rest.
To my knowledge, Peter was not a ventriloquist.
All right,
you mean like throwing his voice and, doing things like that? No.
Okay. Well, I said the same thing there, too, on it, and I said that's, completely ridiculous. So they can all put it where the stick don't fit.
Was that one of the things that was going around, that Peter was a ventriloquist?
Yeah, it was. Mm-hmm.
Being able to throw his voice on things like that?
Yeah, it was, and of course that was, squashed that right away, but the fact of it is, come on. Give him,
no,
I think he deserves a lot more than that.
I've seen firsthand some of the things that he would do that would just blow people's minds away when, he would meet them and talk about deceased relatives and things like that, and just, it was unbelievable when he could walk into a house and detect presence. Be like, here we go, here's somebody here, this person came from this area, he's been here for 7 years, he gave you every kind of research known to man to, everything that he did was always so spot on.
Well, Tommy, did you inherit that same ability?
No, I always had the funny line that was kind of like this, Angela. Peter was the psychic, I was the psycho of the family.
Oh, that's not true. You have an amazing career yourself in your lifetime, Tommy. You've done some amazing, work. And is there a place that yet that we can say that you're calling yourself at home and that people can still reach you at?
Well, I have currently launched a new entertainment, marketing, and media company that's called Rock Band Entertainment, and you'll be hearing more about that. But my partner and I are currently out there helping to keep the vibrancy of established rock acts, heritage bands, keeping their brand name alive, going through helping them get radio interviews, promotions, contests, marketing, things like that through radio, television, cinema, web broadcast, webcast, things like that.
Wow, amazing!
Is there a website on that?
We're building it up now. We're building up rockband.com, rockbandentertainment.com, and it'll be launched. We're hoping within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And right now, there's just some information basically about myself and my partner on there now, and it'll be a pretty rich, vibrant site with a lot of great rock acts on there, and maybe some future superstars on there too.
Very cool. Well, let us know when you're ready to launch that, and we can put a link on our site for that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Any news from the Queen Mary that they're going to follow through with what they promised?
No, at this point still it's kind of been, the Queen Mary, unfortunately, at the time went through an ownership change. They had every intention with their old ownership group to create a long-lasting memorial to Peter with his ashes aboard the ship. And what happened then was the new ownership came in and decided they wanted to go away from recognizing the work that Peter or other, paranormal people that had done things on the ship. So they went a different way, and it just didn't work out at this time. And who knows if they decide that it makes sense, and again it's done in the right spirit and tribute to Peter. We'd always consider going back there. I mean, Peter did some of his best work on the Queen Mary.
Absolutely on that, and there's been a couple, actually, I won't name names, but people have thought that they had Peter talking with them up there, and I thought, this is the thing about it. He's not going to, there's some things that Peter would probably do, but not waste his time. He's done his bout with the Queen Mary, and the fact of it is that, he had his heart for a couple of the spirits that were there, and I'm sure that he's
Well, have you talked to him lately?
He's singing, I think. And for his fans out there that didn't know this, that Peter had a beautiful singing voice.
He was a tremendous singer. When I grew up, I mean, Peter, one of the reasons I got into music was I think the Beatles, and then I had an older brother that was always singing, and it was kind of like part Elvis Presley, and it was pretty fun growing up, I'll tell you with that.
So, Tommy, I heard the rumors of Sam Elliott might be a potential for you.
Oh, please.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, when I was asked, who do you think would be a great actor to portray your brother in this, it's funny, I was looking through, and I was always a fan of Sam Elliott's, and I forgot what the picture I saw him in. I was like, whoa, look at this. And it was like he had the silver gray hair and the big mustache. And he's got a great booming voice like Peter did, too. And I was like, he's the perfect person for it. But there are some other names out there, too. But personally, my choice would be to get Sam Elliott to do something like that. And there are some other good actors.
As long as I can be on the set to meet him.
We'll make sure that happens.
So, Tommy, how old was Peter?
What was the question? I didn't hear it. Do we have a bad connection, Tuesday? Hello? Hello?
I think that you probably were the only one that, maybe one other person I thought maybe would know, who knew how old Peter was. And so, and Peter would say, I'm just 25.
Yeah.
And I get asked that quite often. How old was Peter? I don't know. He never would tell me.
Here's my older brother, Tommy, and
well,
I'm catching up to him now.
Yeah, well, you know what, Tommy, there's not a day that I don't miss him. I miss him dearly every day.
Well, we all do. Very. It was a significant loss, and trying to recuperate from that was difficult. But Peter was always like, "Let's move on and let's move forward."
Yeah, absolutely, very true. Well, thank you. I'm glad that we caught you for the last couple minutes, although it was a short couple minutes. But
and I'm so sorry that I was late and I marked down your phone number wrong and calling the show. I could be such a dumbhead sometimes too.
Well, that's okay, Tommy. At least we got you on here.
But thank you so much, Tuesday and Angela. I appreciate you keeping Peter's memory going, and as we go into the first year of the anniversary of his death, I just wish that all his fans keep him in mind and keep listening to your show and watching your website, and we'll definitely be feeding you information when we can, and as we move forward with a movie, a television show, a book, whatever it is that we can put together, you'll get the information as quickly as anybody will. You'll always be one of the first people in the world.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Tommy.
All right, everybody. Everybody have a great week ahead of you. Take care of each other and yourself. God bless, and we'll see you next week. This is Portal Paranormal Talk Radio. I'm your host, Tuesday Miles.
And I'm Angela Thomas.
See you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Tuesday.